I remember the moment too clearly. My daughter, Elira, walked through the front door, dropped her backpack by the stairs like she always did, and said nothing. Her face was pale. She kept her eyes low, like she didn't want to be seen. I almost didn't notice it at first, the red stain near the hem of her pale pink shirt. It wasn't huge, but it was fresh, deep, sharp red. "Elira," I said, trying to stay calm. "Honey, are you hurt?" She looked up at me slowly and shook her head. "Number." "It's not mine," she said, her voice quiet. "He just wanted to play tag." The words didn't make sense. I crouched down and looked her over, searching her arms, her legs, her neck. No cuts, no bruises, nothing that could explain it. "Elira, who's he?" "The boy, from the hallway," she said. She wouldn't say anything else. She just walked past me and went upstairs, like it had been the most normal thing in the world. I stood in the hallway, still staring at that red stain. Something in my chest twisted, deep, maternal, instinctive. It didn't feel like a schoolyard scrape or a nosebleed. It felt wrong, not just scary, wrong. Later that night, I called the school, but no one picked up. I figured it could wait until morning. Maybe she had gotten tangled up with another kid. Maybe they were roughhousing. Kids say strange things all the time. I told myself that over and over while folding laundry, reheating dinner, brushing her hair before bed. I told myself everything was fine, but in the morning, around 7:30, I got a call from the school principal. Her voice was clipped, unsure. "Miss Ryland, we were checking our attendance logs and Elira wasn't here yesterday." I blinked. That's not possible. I dropped her off myself. I watched her walk inside. "I'm just letting you know," the principal said. "There's no record of her attending. She was marked absent all day. Her teacher never saw her." That made no sense. I packed her lunch. I filled her water bottle. I watched her walk through the doors. I was still holding the phone in my hand when I went to check her backpack. Maybe there'd be a class note, something that would make sense of this. Instead, I found her homework folder, complete with a math worksheet I hadn't seen before. The work was done. Every problem solved. But the writing wasn't hers. Elira has bubbly, looping handwriting, like any 9-year-old. This one was different. Every number was sharp and perfect, precise, almost printed. And in the corner of the page, above where the name should be, someone had written, Callan D. That's when I stopped pretending this was just a misunderstanding. Something happened yesterday. My daughter was somewhere, and it wasn't her classroom. Our mornings were usually calm. Elira would come downstairs in her oversized hoodie, still half asleep, dragging her feet across the hardwood floor like a tiny ghost. I'd be in the kitchen already, pouring her cereal and sipping coffee, trying to keep the world moving forward one routine at a time. We lived in a 2-bedroom ranch house in Autumn Creek just outside of town. Quiet streets, porch flags in the wind, kids on scooters in the afternoons. After the divorce, I picked this place for the silence, for the space to breathe. It was just the two of us, me and my daughter, and we made a home out of the emptiness. Elira is 9. She loves watercolor painting, storybooks about animals that wear tiny coats, and asking questions about everything. Her imagination has always been vivid, sometimes worryingly so, but she's gentle, curious, and incredibly sensitive. She cries during commercials if the music sounds too sad. She gets overwhelmed by loud voices. I've always tried to protect that softness in her, even when the world didn't seem to care about preserving it. Every weekday, I'd walk her to the school gate. I worked from home as a medical transcriptionist, so my schedule was flexible. I always made sure she got inside before heading back. Most mornings, she'd give me this little half-wave as she disappeared behind the front doors of Whitlock Elementary. That Tuesday morning was no different. The sky was gray but not stormy. There was a light wind tugging at her backpack straps. She waved. I waved back. Then I went home, refilled my coffee, and got back to work. There were no warning signs, no screams, no phone calls, not even a strange text. By all appearances, everything about that day was normal. Around 3:10 p.m., I heard the front door creak open. Elira stepped in and dropped her backpack like she always did. Her shoes were muddy, which I remember because I had just cleaned the floor the night before. She looked tired and pale. I asked how her day was, and she said, "It was okay," without meeting my eyes. Then she went upstairs. It didn't click at first. I was in the middle of sorting emails for a clinic in Phoenix and barely looked up. I didn't see the blood until I passed the stairs and spotted her shirt hanging halfway out of the laundry basket. That was when everything shifted. But before that moment, I didn't know anything was wrong. That evening, I watched her quietly as we sat at the kitchen table. She wasn't talking like she normally did. No silly stories, no questions about outer space or jellyfish or what dreams are made of. She just pushed her mashed potatoes around the plate. At one point, I asked her if everything was okay. She nodded, said she was just tired. Looking back now, I keep wondering how I didn't notice sooner. She had been different for a few days, more withdrawn. Her drawings had shifted too. The animals she once loved had turned into tall, faceless shapes. One drawing was just a long hallway. Another had her standing next to a stick figure wearing a long gray coat. She told me the boy's name before, weeks ago, but I hadn't paid attention. I was playing tag in the hallway, she had said one night. With who? I asked. With Callan. I assumed he was a classmate, maybe someone from a different grade. She didn't talk about him again for a while, and I didn't push it. I regret that now. It's easy to dismiss things when they don't fit into the rhythm of your life. You assume kids exaggerate or invent friends or play pretend because that's what kids do. But when the blood shows up and the school says your daughter was never even there, those little moments start to feel like warnings you ignored. That night, before the call from the principal, before the handwriting on the homework page, I sat at the edge of her bed and tucked her in like always. She was already half asleep, but I leaned down and kissed her forehead and whispered, "I love you." She didn't open her eyes. She just whispered back, "I didn't mean to go in there." I froze. "Go where, baby?" Her breathing slowed, and she didn't answer. I sat in the dark next to her for an hour, watching her chest rise and fall, wondering what door she had walked through that day. I didn't know yet how far she'd gone. The call came early, just after I'd packed Alira's lunch and sent her off to school. I was rinsing out her cereal bowl when my cell phone buzzed on the counter. The screen said, Whitlock Elementary. I picked it up, expecting a fundraiser reminder or maybe a late field trip notice. Instead, I heard hesitation in the principal's voice before she spoke. "Ms. Ryland, I just wanted to check in about Alira." My stomach tightened. "Is she all right?" "Well, that's the thing. She wasn't in class yesterday." I stood still. "What do you mean?" "She was marked absent for the full day. Her teacher assumed she was homesick." I blinked. "No, I dropped her off. I watched her walk in. She had her lunchbox and her backpack. She waved to me at the door." The principal paused. "We've reviewed the front entrance footage. She's not on it." I gripped the edge of the counter. "That's impossible." "I'm just sharing what we found," she said gently. "We're going to keep checking, but for now we need to know, are you sure she was here yesterday?" I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My mind had started racing. I had signed her reading log the night before. She had been sitting right there on the couch, legs tucked under her, pencil in hand. But something was gnawing at the back of my mind. When the call ended, I went straight to her backpack. It was still where she'd left it the day before, slouched against the banister. I unzipped the main pocket and pulled out her homework folder. Inside was a worksheet I hadn't seen before, a full page of multiplication problems, all correct. But the handwriting wasn't Alira's. Her writing is round, a little wobbly with uneven spacing between numbers. This was sharp and clean. The numbers were printed almost mechanically. At the top, instead of her name, it said Callan D. I stared at the page. My pulse picked up. I carried the worksheet to the dining room table and sat down. I flipped through the rest of her papers: spelling practice, a drawing of a playground, a math quiz with a gold star. Everything looked normal until I noticed another paper tucked behind the others. It was a story prompt titled, "If I Were Invisible." The handwriting was the same strange, blocky style, but the story wasn't about being invisible. It was just 3 sentences, written over and over. He asked me to follow him. I didn't mean to. I wanted to go home. I read the words again. Each time, my throat tightened. I waited until school ended and drove straight there. I didn't care about appointments or pickup procedures. I marched to the office and asked to see Miss Kelsey, Alira's teacher. She met me in the hallway, arms crossed, polite but tense. "Miss Kelsey," I said, "I need to know if you saw my daughter yesterday." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Miss Ryland, Elira hasn't been in class for 2 days. She came home. She had homework. She said she was playing tag with a boy in the hallway." The teacher's brow furrowed. "What boy?" "She said his name was Callan. She said he wanted to play tag." Miss Kelsey took a step back. "Callan Dorsey? Is that a student here?" "No," she said slowly. "That name. It's from a story the older kids used to talk about. Callan was a boy who died here, years ago. He used to sneak into the East Wing during recess. That section's been shut down since before I even started." I stared at her. My daughter couldn't have known that. "Kids talk," she said, though her voice had lost confidence. "It's probably just—" She came home with blood on her shirt. That stopped her. Her arms dropped to her sides. "What kind of blood?" "I don't know. She said it wasn't hers." A silence stretched between us. Then she cleared her throat. "You should talk to the principal again. Maybe check the security cameras from the East Wing, but you won't find much." "Why not?" She looked at me, hesitant. "There are no cameras down that hallway." I left the school that day with more questions than answers. That night, I tried to talk to Elira again. She was curled up in bed, holding her stuffed fox. I sat beside her. "Elira, I need to ask you something." She looked up at me, eyes wide but calm. "You told me you played tag with a boy. Can you tell me where that happened?" "In the hallway." "What hallway?" She paused, then said, "The one with no lights." I felt a chill run across my back. "What's his name?" "Callan. He wanted to show me something." "What did he show you?" She shook her head. "Can't tell. He said I promised." "You didn't promise anything to him, sweetheart." "Yes, I did," she whispered. "I said I'd come back." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the hallway outside her room, listening to the wind, wondering how far I was willing to go to find out what was happening to my daughter. The next morning, I emailed the school district and requested full access to any surveillance footage they had. I wasn't going to wait for answers. I was going to get them myself. The school district responded to my request by the following afternoon. A file of time-stamped hallway footage was sent to my inbox with a short note. "This is all we have access to from the dates in question. Let us know if you need further clarification." I didn't need clarification. I needed evidence. I opened the first video and scrolled to the morning drop-off window, 7:45 to 8:15 a.m. Students poured in, dozens at a time, but I didn't see Elira. I watched that entire 30-minute stretch twice. No sign of her. The next clip showed the hallway near her classroom. The timestamp read 8:13 a.m. And there she was. Just for a second. She appeared at the far end of the hallway, alone, just out of focus. She was holding her backpack in one hand and her coat in the other, looking to her right toward the closed-off East Wing. Then, without taking a step, she vanished from the frame. I scrubbed backward, forward, paused, zoomed in. Her figure never passed the camera again. There was no exit, no movement beyond that moment. She had disappeared inside the school and no one saw her come out. I replayed it one last time, and a new detail made my stomach twist. Her face. It was pale, and her expression wasn't frightened. It was blank, like she was waiting. I drove to the school. I didn't tell them I was coming. I walked straight to the office, handed my ID to the front desk woman, and asked to speak to Principal Rivera. I wasn't loud or angry. I was done begging. I was here for answers. She met me in her office 10 minutes later. "I saw the footage," I said before she could speak. "I saw Elira in the hallway near the East Wing." "That section is sealed off," she said, adjusting her glasses. "We don't use that part of the building. It was closed after a utility issue years ago." "She was there. I need to see it." "That's not possible." I leaned forward. "Do you want me to get the police involved?" Her shoulders dropped. She looked tired. "There's nothing back there but old desks and storage bins. I can't let you in without district approval." "I don't care about bins," I said. "My daughter went in there. She came home with blood on her shirt. Something happened and no one is taking it seriously." Rivera looked at me for a long moment, then finally said, "Come back after school hours. I'll unlock the door for you." At 4:15 p.m., I returned and followed her down the hallway. She walked quietly, keys jangling in her hand, stopping in front of a rusted metal door near the far end of the East Hall. "There's no lighting past this point. Bring your phone," she said. She turned the key and pushed the door open. It creaked slowly. The air inside was cold and smelled like dust and old paper. I stepped in and clicked on my flashlight. She didn't follow me. "I'll be right here," she said. 10 minutes. I nodded and walked in. The hallway felt too narrow, like the walls were pressing in. The floor was littered with broken tiles and scattered paper. I passed empty bookshelves and toppled chairs. On the walls, peeling paint curled like brittle skin. At the far end of the hallway, I found a door slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped into a small classroom. It had no desks, just 2 rows of cubbies, a chalkboard, and faded decorations on the wall. Paper ghosts, a pumpkin, a child's drawing of a school bus. And on the floor, near the wall, was a piece of paper that didn't belong. I picked it up. It was a drawing in crayon. 2 stick figures, one taller than the other, both standing in front of what looked like lockers. The taller one wore a gray rectangle, a coat. The smaller one had a pink shirt with red marks near the bottom. Her hair was brown, long, like Alera's. Underneath, written in blocky capital letters, "Tag, you're it." My breath caught. My knees felt weak. I turned the paper over. On the back, barely visible, were the letters, Callan D. I didn't realize my hand was shaking until I tried to take a photo of it. I backed out of the room and down the hallway, barely looking where I was going. When I reached the entrance, the principal was still standing by the door. "Did you find anything?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just showed her the drawing. She stared at it for a long time. "Where did you get this?" "In a classroom. The last door on the left." She looked unsettled. "That room was supposed to be sealed." We walked back in silence. I drove home without turning on the radio, the drawing folded carefully in the passenger seat beside me. At red lights, I kept glancing at it. The pink shirt, the red smudge, the empty eyes. That night, I didn't ask Elira any more questions. I didn't want to push her, not yet. She ate dinner quietly, then drew at the kitchen table. I walked past her and looked down at what she was working on. It was another hallway. Empty. Long. Dark. At the end stood the outline of a boy. I didn't say a word. I just watched her draw. I waited until the house was quiet. Elira had gone to bed early. She hadn't said much during dinner, just a few nods, a small smile when I told her we could paint together this weekend. But I could see the unease in her eyes. Something was still with her, something she couldn't name. I walked into her room and sat on the edge of her bed. Her stuffed fox was tucked under her arm. Her eyes opened slightly, blinking in the dark. "I need to ask you something," I said, keeping my voice soft. "And I want you to be honest. No one's in trouble. I just want to understand." She turned toward me but didn't speak. "Elira, who is Callan?" Her face didn't change, but her breathing slowed. "He's my friend." "Where did you meet him?" "In the hallway, behind the cold door." I swallowed. "What did he want?" "He wanted me to stay. Why?" Her fingers tightened around the stuffed animal. "He said he was waiting for someone. He said no one came back before. But I did." I placed my hand gently on her shoulder. "Did he hurt you?" She shook her head. "He was sad. He said the lights turned off before he could find his mom." That line hit like a punch to the chest. "Elira, did he tell you his full name?" She nodded. "Callan Dorsey." I felt a coldness spread through my body. I had read that name just an hour earlier in an old local news article I found buried in a town archive. 20 years ago, a second-grade boy named Callan Dorsey went missing during a Halloween event at Whitlock Elementary. The East Wing had been under renovation at the time. Witnesses last saw him heading down the hallway near the staff lounge. His body wasn't discovered until 2 days later, hidden under a supply cabinet that had toppled in a side room. The report listed blunt force trauma from a fall and exposure. He had been alive for hours, maybe longer, waiting for someone to find him. His mother had arrived 20 minutes late to pick him up. She never forgave herself. "Elira," I said, "why did you go back into the hallway?" Her eyes were open now, focused. "I told him I'd help him finish his homework." "What kind of homework?" She looked confused. "Math. But it's not real homework. It's just numbers he remembers." I didn't know what to say. She pulled the blanket up to her chin. "He said if I helped him, he wouldn't be alone." I reached for her hand. "You don't have to help him anymore." She blinked slowly. "He's gone now." "How do you know?" "Because today, he didn't come to find me." I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the dining table with every paper I'd pulled from Elira's folder, examining each one. The sharp handwriting, the perfect penmanship, and at the top corner of every page, so faint I'd missed it before, was a small looping D, not hers, his. I called the school the next morning. I didn't want to make a scene. I just needed to speak to someone who had been there back then. After some back and forth, I was put in touch with Mr. Tom Ainsley, a retired janitor who had worked at Whitlock for 30 years. I met him at the town library the next afternoon. "I remember Callan," he said before I even asked. "Quiet kid, never caused trouble." "What happened?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "They shut down the wing after he died. No one wanted to talk about it. His mom used to sit out front every afternoon for months just staring at the building. Said she could feel him still in there. Said he hadn't gone." I showed him the drawing Elira found. He looked down at it and didn't speak for a long time. Then he nodded. "That looks like the old cubby room. I used to clean in there. That pumpkin on the wall? That was part of the Halloween party decorations." I held up another paper, Elira's fake homework with the strange handwriting. "Did Callan ever talk about math?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, kid loved math. Always had the best penmanship in the class." I thanked him and left. I didn't need more confirmation. At home, Elira was in the living room painting quietly. She looked lighter, almost like she was coming out of a long fog. I sat across from her and asked what she was painting. She showed me the page. It was her and another child, smiling, sitting cross-legged under a tree. The boy wore a gray coat. The sun was high and both of them were looking at it. I asked, "What's this one called?" She smiled. "No tag, just friends now." I didn't ask anything else. For a while, I kept expecting it to start again. I thought maybe Callan would come back. Maybe the drawings would turn darker again. Maybe I had only imagined the calm. But as days passed, Elira began returning to herself. She started humming again while she brushed her teeth. She giggled at cartoons. Her drawings filled with foxes and rabbits again instead of endless hallways and figures with missing faces. The air in our house, which had felt heavy for so long, began to feel warm again. But I still locked the front door by 5. I still checked on her at night twice. I still found myself watching shadows a little more carefully. When something like that happens, when your daughter comes home with blood on her shirt and no explanation, the world doesn't go back to normal. You just learn how to live around the shape of what changed. I pulled Elira from school for 2 weeks. I didn't call it a break or a mental health day. I just said we were going to have some time together, just the two of us. We drove to the lake, we painted rocks and fed ducks and baked cookies, and read her favorite books under a blanket on the couch. One night during that break, she asked if she could sleep in my bed. I said yes before she finished the question. While she was falling asleep, I whispered, "You were very brave." Her eyes stayed closed, but she smiled. "He wasn't bad, Mommy, just lonely." "I know," I said, "but it's not your job to keep him company." He didn't want to leave until someone told him it was okay. I wrapped my arm around her and pulled her close. "You told him." That night, she slept deeper than I had seen in weeks. Eventually, I met with a child psychologist, not because I thought something was wrong, but because I needed someone with training to tell me I wasn't crazy for believing my daughter had met the ghost of a dead boy. The therapist listened carefully and asked the right questions. In the end, she told me Elira showed no signs of delusion or confusion, just sensitivity, empathy. Some children, she said, have a way of being open, like antennae catching signals most of us can't pick up. I didn't need a clinical term. I believed what I had seen, what I had heard, what Elira had shown me in her drawings and her stories and her silence. Whitlock Elementary quietly closed off the East Wing permanently a week later. The principal never called me again. The hallway was sealed. and I heard through another parent that the staff avoided the subject entirely. The name Callan Dorsey wasn't mentioned in morning meetings or whispered in break rooms anymore. It was as if they wanted to bury the story for good. But some stories don't stay buried. Some live on through children and drawings and names written in unfamiliar handwriting. Last week, Elira brought home a craft from art class. It was a paper cutout of her and someone else standing under a tree. The second figure was small, round-faced, and smiling. He wore a long gray coat. She taped it to her bedroom wall without saying a word. I stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment. "Elira," I said, "do you still think about him?" She nodded once. "Only when I want to." "Do you think he's okay now?" She thought about it. He found his way out. That's all he wanted. It wasn't dramatic. There was no thunderstorm, no haunting scream in the night, just a child who had been lost for a long time, and another child who saw him, heard him, played tag with him when no one else would. I still keep the drawings in a file under my bed, the ones that don't look like Elira's usual work, the ones with the sharp handwriting and the boy in the coat. I don't show them to anyone. I don't feel the need to prove anything. Because this story isn't for skeptics or thrill seekers. It's for the mothers who know when something is wrong before the world does. For the kids who come home changed in ways we can't see. For anyone who's ever felt a presence in a hallway where there should be none. If there's one thing I know now, it's that children see things we forget how to look for. They aren't always pretending. Sometimes they're just telling us what's there, plain as day. And sometimes, when we actually listen, we help more than one child find their way home. If this story gave you chills, if it made your heart race the way mine did when I first saw the blood on my daughter's shirt, then I want to hear from you. Would you have believed her? Would you have known what to do? Let me know in the comments. Your thoughts, your questions, or even your own stories. I read every single one. If you felt something while watching, please take a second to like the video. Share it with someone who loves mysterious stories that are grounded in something real. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We tell stories here that make you think, that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing that sometimes the things we can't explain are the ones worth telling. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and listen closely. You never know who's still trying to be heard.